Thank you so much. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about monitoring and alerts, and our panelists here are going to talk about just kind of the evolution of monitoring and alerts and where we are with the cyber criminal activity, and going to leave everybody with some tips and tricks on best practices around monitoring and alerts. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it to the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into the questions. I did put a comment in the chat box to everybody to please put your questions in the chat, and we'd love to bring you into the conversation. So I know there's over 100 people in the audience, so it's always more fun when you join us. So with that, I will throw it to Luciano to do an introduction and tell a little bit about where you work and who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lorraine. So my name is Luciano Ferrari. So I am the Chief Security Architect for Navis. I've been working in the cybersecurity field for over 25 years now. Navis is a software company from the Silicon Valley. What we do, we do software for ports and terminals to do container management. So we are in that space of supply chain in the maritime industry. It's very unique. So in my role is really try to protect. So we are moving right now. In the past, the product was being deployed on premises for the customers, but now we're offering the SaaS solution, our SaaS solution that they can do over the cloud. So I have to make sure that the product is really solid on the cloud, and make sure we do all the protection of information from in terms of compliance, and also in terms of attackers, hackers, to make sure that it's going to be secure so they can operate their ports and terminals more effectively.
Very good. It's such a critical thing right now, the supply chain, obviously. So I know you guys are got your hands full. All right, let's go to Ethan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come speak with everyone today. I really do look at it as an opportunity. I'm a career CISO. I've been a CISO now almost 20 years. It was about that time I was asked to join Advanced Auto Parts, which is where I am in my current CISO position. And it's a relatively, I wouldn't say a young program, but we are maturing quickly thanks to a board of directors and a group of executives that have really conveyed a strong tone from the top and have given us the necessary resources to build out the program that we're building.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Waldrop, and thanks, Lorraine, for inviting me again. Very, very honored to have the opportunity to speak with everybody today. My name is Jonathan Waldrop. I'm the Senior Director of Cybersecurity at Insight Global. I've been in IT and for about over 15 years now. Got my start in the government, building and developing teams in IT, but also cybersecurity as well, and experience across the board in several different verticals. But if you've never heard of Insight Global, many of you probably have. We are a recruiting and staffing company, workforce management and so forth, and contract, short-term labor, long-term, permanent placement, all those kinds of things that I'm sure you're well familiar with the talent shortage that we're experiencing. So anyway, very glad to be here and really excited to talk about monitoring and alerting. It's key to who we are as security practitioners. We can't live without it. We can't live with it sometimes, but hopefully we'll be able to make some headway with that topic over the next several minutes. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, the title is Criminals, the Cyber Criminals Are Watching You. Are you watching them? And, the importance of this information is just vital to a risk management program. So we're going to start off by talking about where does this monitoring and alert, kind of strategy fit within your risk management program, and talk a little bit about the evolution of that. And I'm going to start with Ethan.
Sure. So when we think about risk management overall, and we think about alert and monitoring and understanding that space, it really has been a journey. It starts with kind of that basic collection of what do you want to log? What do you want to look at? What do you want to monitor? What's important? So I always joke that I would never want to switch places with the CISO that walked into my office 2.5 years ago, just because of the just sheer amount of information that I just didn't know about. And fast forward to today, where we have a robust monitoring platform, and we are pulling together events from various different platforms, whether it be within the cloud, within our own data centers, within our firewalls, within the fabric of the network, wherever it might be, and trying to bring together those log events to build together valuable use cases that identify risk, has, like I said, been a journey. I think about earlier days when we were dealing with smaller size incidents that maybe came into the environment, it's in those days that you recognize your blind spots, and knowing to move quickly during those early days. If you see a blind spot, make sure that you don't get burnt twice by the same blind spot. So I mean, that to me is the most valuable lesson that I've been able to pull out of any of my previous incidents, is really pulling apart that incident after the fact and finding out, what went wrong, what didn't we see, and what do we need to see in the future to have less noise in the system and more high fidelity.
Okay, good. And let's go next to Jonathan. I know, like we mentioned, visibility is so critical. And like you said, Ethan, it's important to learn from what has happened and implement so that you can get ahead of it. So Jonathan, let's share your thoughts with the audience on just sort of this evolution of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing Ethan touched on was really about knowing what you're monitoring and even knowing what you're not, if you're not monitoring something, right? There's so much data and telemetry out there. All of our systems are spitting out tons and tons of data all the time. We really have to know what system that's coming from and be able to parse that. And so you've really got to understand how your business processes result in your system working in some way that's going to generate an alert for you. Is it a false positive that you spend several hours digging down into that wormhole or that rabbit hole, only to find out, oh, this is very normal behavior, right? So those kind of things, with as much data as we have today, it's really hard to do that in one system. Several years ago, the magic sauce was go buy a SIM, right? Everybody said, you need a SIM, you got to have one. And then, well, what about, there's another layer of infrastructure with cloud and IaaS and PaaS, all of those different elements of that. And I think that's really where it comes into really having the right tools and capabilities to be able to sift through those logs, to be able to extract what is abnormal or what needs my attention today, versus what's normal behavior and noise from a logging and alerting platform.
Very good. Luciano.
Inside the security team, there are silos. We have the risk management team, we have the security operations, or someone who's running vulnerability management. And I really think that they all think that risk is a completely different meaning. So some have a more technical perspective of what risk means, like getting from CVEs or from a technical perspective, from the attacker or the vulnerability. And I think the whole cybersecurity team should talk risk about the same thing. And they need to interact more because they should not work independently. Like, for example, if we have a risk management team that is really trying to understand the risk for the company, they should talk more with the security operations teams to understand what are the attacks that are happening right now in the company. Use that information to level up and understand what is the likelihood for something to happen. Because, for example, risk, likelihood and impact for the company, right? So that's the equation. But normally the risk management teams, they take those baselines from reports that are for the industry or overall for all organizations. But if you can tune that to your company specifically, you can be more effective. You can try to talk to your SOC team. So what's going on right now? Oh, I see that there's an increase in attempts to ransomware right now in this one here. So when they know that information, when they are doing a risk assessment, right, they can maybe change a little bit more the likelihood for that to happen because that's increasing. So they can better tell a story to the executives to make better decisions or to support what would be the next product that we have to pursue, to acquire, or what should be the next product we should run to implement, or something like that.
Yes, very good. And I think that kind of leads right into the next area that we're going to talk about, which is what do you actually do with the alerts? It's one thing, to have all these systems monitoring it, but how do you make it make sense? And like you said, Luciano, report it to the board. And help, just determine what to do with these. So let's go to Jonathan and talk about, from your perspective, how you look at the information as a whole and what you do with it.
Yeah, that's a really, so you think about monitoring and alerting, right? First, you've got to get all the data in one spot, right? And then, your tools are going to have default configs over what they're alerting to. And now, okay, great. So I've got a bunch of alerts. What do I do with it? And really, it really comes down to your internal processes for how you're handling this data. Again, how are you sifting through what's false positive or and ensuring you don't have false negatives for that matter as well. But it really is that kind of next evolution of what do you do with these alerts?
Very good. Ethan, let's hear your thoughts on this.
So, I have to go back to those early days, because a lot of times you might be getting alerts on systems that you're not even vulnerable due to whatever, the operating system version or a patch that you might have already applied. So being able to put that intelligence on top of that data becomes really important. Again, back to that word fidelity, so that when you see an event, it's a real event, one that you want to necessarily take action on as quickly as possible. But really, it's time and practice and shampoo analogies around lather, rinse, and repeat, and making sure that over time you can show, hey, when I started this, I was responding. I had 2,000 events in Splunk, but over time I was able to reduce and show the false positives and reduce the redundancy in the platform. So therefore come back to a manageable number of maybe several hundred within a course of a day, as opposed to thousands that became more actionable for my security operations team to move on.
It really is trying to stay ahead of the cybercriminals. It's like, you get things set and then something else happens that hasn't happened before. Then you got to get out in front of it again. So let's talk a little bit more detail about the incident response plan and your process around that. For example, when do you engage the insurance company or law enforcement? So I'll throw it to you, Jonathan, to start that conversation. And again, I would love to hear from the audience what your thoughts are on this. Any questions or tips that you have for implementing implementing monitoring and alerts in your IR plan?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. And so, one of the key things I think about, you mentioned insurance carriers. If you have cybersecurity insurance that covers ransomware, congratulations, because the field of those companies is really growing small. The barrier to entry there is getting so high. Again, having that internal process of escalation, do you have the relationship with your legal team to go say, hey, we've got an incident, we're investigating it. We're not sure if it's a big deal or if it's not a big deal yet, but want to loop you in. Help us, you want that legal advice that you can rely on. Again, that they've got some of that visibility as far as protecting the company at large, right? And then, we talked about insurance carriers and law enforcement and things like that. You want to have that plan structured beforehand, because everybody has their own thing they're concerned about, right? You're concerned about protecting your company. Law enforcement's concerned about finding the bad guy, whatever the collateral damage is. Insurance company doesn't want to pay. So everybody's got they're looking out for themselves. So you really got to understand where and when you pull those pieces into play. And again, it really goes back to walking through and having some tabletop exercises to know and to be able to talk through with your executive team that are going to be making some of those decisions.
Okay, great. So let's go to Luciano and hear your thoughts on, implementing monitoring and alerts in your IR process.
But from a monitoring perspective, one of the things that is really important is about visibility, right? So you really want to make sure that you're monitoring everything from the whole company and you don't have any blind spots. So, for example, I come from an organization that we really develop products. So there is a trend that we have maybe two different words. So one is the enterprise IT side of the house, and then you have the products. So there is a trend. Okay, we have security teams that will take care of the products for our customers, and a security team. And I'm trying to change that, and I'm trying to consolidate all the efforts because I don't want two different security teams to manage different parts of the company. So question the number of alerts you're receiving and question that you really have the full visibility, because the IT is changing a lot and there are implementations that maybe cybersecurity teams are not aware of. So you have to keep it doing this kind of a checklist from time to time to make sure you are covering everything, right?
And you've mentioned before, just Luciano, about getting ready for what's to come, the cloud computing and AI and things like that. Do you have a comment on, how you go about that? Because this is something that you have to look at, kind of into the future.
We have to get ready for really what's coming. You're right. So right now, we are moving from everybody working primarily on premises to maybe hybrid on premises and cloud to maybe just on cloud. So I'm not sure what's the stage of the company, but the perimeter has really changed, right? So that's one thing that we need to prepare ourselves. So another issue that I see is about the quantum computing, for example. I don't see too many people talking about that. Imagine when people start replacing standard computers to quantum computers. It's not like the 2000 when you have the millennium bug issue, right? But when we start having those replacements, so those who have access to a quantum computing, you know that the cryptography will be game over for cryptography as we know, and how you are able to make sure that this transition will work properly, and how you're going to be able to protect yourselves if you can't, because nobody can just upgrade 100% of your assets to quantum computer from one day to the other. So that's going to be impossible. So what will be the process that you're going to be implementing in your company to make sure you are protected against those kind of things, right? So that's also, it's still a challenge today. I don't think that there is a defined answer to that, but you have to start thinking that right now, because in the near future, that's going to be a big problem, right?
That's
if I can just jump in there, Laureen, that Luciano, you bring up a fantastic point, right? We're all developing and increasing our technologies. To me, that really harkens back to you've got to involve your security teams. Security really has to, and we're still saying this after we've been saying it for many, many years, that you've got to involve security early on in those types of projects, because it is just that critical.
Ethan, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I have a little analogy that I'll quickly use. I'll always ask, hey, what are the brakes on the car for? I'm in the auto parts business, so this one works pretty well for me. So what are those brakes for? And I promise you, everyone's going to raise their hand and they're going to tell you that, well, the brakes are there to stop your car. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, no. Yeah, I mean, they of course stop your car, but actually those brakes are there to help you go fast. Right? Nobody in this room is going to get in their car and drive their car fast if they don't have brakes, right? If they don't have those guardrails that they need to keep themselves safe when they want to take those risks, then they're going to put themselves into a world of hurt. So, okay, so that is just an analogy. So how do we take that analogy and apply it to kind of that real life model? And I think everyone on this call over the last couple of years has seen the world change in such a drastic way. All of a sudden, the majority of workers were told to go home, to take their laptops and plug them into their home networks and start working from home. Most of my peers started pulling out their hair, because that really changed the model completely, 100%. We were relying on those corporate networks to protect our employees. We thought, why not? Every day, the very vast majority of them come into work, plug in their laptops, and then therefore are protected by network access control, proxy servers, intrusion detection, all the tools that we have been building for the last 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, are invisible. So now you've changed, the business has changed both sides of the equation so drastically that if we're not thinking together and really coming up with really spot on, clever solutions, then we're going to miss it. So I think that's a real important point that I wanted to make in this transition.
I just want to give a minute to have Luciano and Jonathan kind of comment on that, because I think it's a broad enough thing that I think is important. So Jonathan, what are your comments?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. I was going to try to jump in here too. Ethan touched on it a bit about zero trust and what does that mean, right? There's a lot of companies that is in their marketing, their glossies, their billboards, advertisements, all that kind of stuff. But what does that really mean? Is that a thing you go buy? Cool, I'll go buy zero trust and we'll be done. Absolutely not, right? It is 100% a strategy and an architecture, a framework for how you're developing and you're providing your services to your clients and your users. And it's so critical for today, 100% back to Ethan's point, that you have visibility on those assets, right? And so it really gets back to, do you know what you're monitoring, and are you really receiving all the alerts that you think you are? Because if you stop receiving alerts as soon as that employee picks up their laptop and goes home for the past 2 years, you lose that visibility. But if they're still connecting to some things, maybe it connects over the internet, maybe it connects directly to a cloud infrastructure, whatever the case is, you've got to have the right types of telemetry and the right agents, if you will, to do. And agents is a bad word, right? At least for me. You talked about NAC, and again, go in the office and, okay, what happens if I plug into the port that's on the wall? Okay, that's fine. That's going to block me or whatever. But how do you know when your users are connecting to, maybe they go to the coffee shop to grab a cup of coffee and sit outside, right? Are they connecting to the actual coffee shop Wi-Fi, or are they connecting to something else? How are you going to protect that? And you really have to have a way to monitor that. And there's all these kinds of things. It really has shifted. It's really about knowing what your normal traffic patterns look like, and what does that normal monitoring look like.
Luciano, I'll give you a chance to comment as well.
So I really think that there are certain things that we cannot predict, that we cannot act very fast. But I know it's really hard for CISOs to try to be out of the ongoing things for the day, because there are so many things going on. But they really need to get to more from a strategic version and think ahead, like 3, 4, 5 years ahead. So I adopted some kind of things in the past. So normally I allow the team to really do the kind of one congress per year, but also a formal training. But besides that, I normally acquire things like licenses for trainings, like online, that the people can take and do some labs by themselves the whole year, and try to figure out ways to incentivize people to take those trainings. Like, for example, gamification. Hey, who one is on the top of the list for this next 3 or 6 months? So I'll give like 100 gift certificate, right? So people sometimes try to keep up on the training so they can win something or whatever, right? Risk is something that and there is a mistaken that when people think that the role from a CISO or from a risk manager is really to reduce companies' risk. I think this is a wrong observation, and that's a wrong assumption. We are not here as a security to lower the risk for anybody. So we're really here to manage the risk, and it's a difference.
Spot on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the only thing I would add is just we're here to help understand the risk, right? What is the actual impact going to be? And I was having this conversation literally just this morning. It's not our job to fix the risk or to make it go down to zero. It's to identify it and say, okay, stakeholder, business stakeholder, executive, here's the risk. Here's what you want to do. Here's how much risk there is. The challenge then becomes, how do we actually quantify that, right? Money is the language that pretty much everybody speaks, at least to some extent. And so how do you transfer the risk of having, unencrypted or an open port 80 website, right? What's the risk of that? How do you translate that into money and help drive that point home to help that executive make that decision, right? And that's really where the hard part, at least in my opinion, of our roles comes into play.
So let's use the last kind of 10 minutes here just to talk about what you can leave the audience with as the top 3 tips, or can be 3, 5, 4, whatever you want. But just give the audience what your best practice is for monitoring cybercriminal activity.
Okay, thanks. So I really think it's more, again, get visibility. Make sure you don't have blind spots. and cover them. Number two, I would say, maybe even number one will be people, I think I'll say. Make sure that you have the best person doing the right thing, and make sure that they are well trained and they know what they're doing, because ultimately they're going to be the key responsible for protecting the organization, not the tools. And three, make sure you anticipate things. Don't try to, if you see a wave coming, try to make sure that you anticipate things. If you need to change your strategy, try to see things a little bit ahead, so then you can be more effective when the wave really hits you down.
Okay, very good. Ethan.
Yeah. So ultimately, I'll just say practice, and never stop practicing. And what I mean by practice, there's just not one simple way to practice, right? You've got to introduce different levels of practice within your practice. And what I mean by that is, yes, absolutely, you need to be having tabletop exercises with your executives, right? Your executives need to know how they're going to respond when there's a breach, right? You need to prepare for that stuff. You can't do that on the fly when you're worried about locking down the network and preventing everything from falling apart. I hope that I was able to convey some learnable moments here during this webinar. But frankly, I pulled away plenty too. And I'm really, really grateful to talk to my peers who really taught me a lot, right? And that is just so paramount that we continue that dialogue. And I make a big point of it in my career to make sure that I continue to nourish those relationships, because those are the people I'm going to count on the most. Lastly, which is similar, is really around partnership, right? Know your legal team. Know them well. Know your compliance team. Have those relationships set up. Don't be walking into their office for the first time when you're in the middle of an incident saying, "Hi, I'm your CISO." No, that's not gonna fly. And we talk a lot about tools and technology, but we all know the ones that are successful in this business are the ones that are able to build those partnerships. So those are my three takeaways.
We have a question from the audience, but I'm going to have Jonathan, you share your tips, and then we're going to go to a zero trust question.
Really, for me, it starts with knowing what you're monitoring. Take your asset inventories, make sure you're monitoring and receiving alerts from those devices. Make sure you know what SaaS providers you have to the extent they're, offloading, sending APIs and all those kinds of things. Make sure you know what you're monitoring and know what's important to your business, so that to make sure you're monitoring those systems and functions. And then the other thing is that the alerts themselves and the information in that is not just important to your security team. You've got to be able to share that with the other parts of IT. Might be business partners that they need some of that, in some cases, some of the nitty gritty information about what happened, right? Your product teams, your development teams, and so forth. A lot of times in security, we tend to operate in our dark rooms with the lights off, and okay, we're going to keep everything to ourselves because it's really secure and sensitive. But we've got to open up those lines of communication. And this is where I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to piggyback on what Ethan said. You've got to have those relationships. With that, hopefully we can answer the couple questions you've got.
Yeah,
there.
we have one question, and we have just a few minutes left, so we'll just be able to address one. If anybody from the audience has any questions for the panelists, I suggest you reach out on LinkedIn. So this is sort of a big question, so unfortunately we have only a couple minutes to answer it. How important is it to implement a zero trust strategy? So I'll open it up. Let's say, Jonathan, you can answer. I'll throw it to anybody else who wants to.
Frankly, it comes down to your business, right? What is your business about? Do you have a business that's, everybody's in the office type thing? Maybe that's not necessary. There's a lot of components that you can take and implement it. Again, zero trust is not one thing. It's a series and an orchestrated system of systems, if you will, that work together, right? You can protect the endpoints. You need to protect your cloud workloads. You need to protect the data, right? The data is becoming the perimeter, right? So if somebody can download data into their home PC from their cloud storage provider or whatever, what happens if that person leaves the company? Does that data still exist, right? There's digital rights management technology that can protect that data after that person doesn't need access to it. There's so many ways it's hard to answer, but it really comes down to what's right for your business, and that's where those relationships come back into play.
Yeah, I'll have Luciano, if you want to just have a minute to talk about zero trust, which I know is a lengthy topic, but.
Yeah, so it is really important to plan that out because, for example, you don't want to implement that as a kind of a traditional VPN, right? You don't want to provide like wide open access to all the applications. So it's really important to really take a step back before implementing and do your homework. Try to specify policies that are specifically going to work to our applications. Try to understand the different kinds of group controls, the application usage, how it works, what are the privileged access that are part of the product. Because if you don't do that homework properly, so it won't be effective. So it's not going to be like a zero trust network by de facto with Scout. It's just going to be like another VPN or something like that, and it's not going to be effective. I try to summarize things just to make sure it's going to be
again, we've actually had several topic panels on zero trust on CISO Street, and like a whole hour dedicated to it. So thanks, everybody. We have to close out now. We're going to bring Kim back in, but I want to thank the panelists and also the audience for participating in the couple questions we got. And with that, I'll throw it to Kim.